Ahoy there, it's Family Jewels 7X, and I'm a fucking pirate this week. I don't know why. Alright, so this week we're going to talk about compression. Hopefully this is going to be a much shorter video than the previous few, but let's see. So for this video, we're going to talk about compressing using the classic compressor that comes with Mixcraft. I have never seen two compressors that are nearly the same, except, I mean, this compressor has pretty much everything that you'll find on a, normal compressor. GarageBand, I have no idea what the hell is going on there. CS Guitar 89's recording guide will help you with that. But, alright, so the first thing we gotta start doing is figuring out what all this shit does, right? Just like everything else. So, let's activate this. Let's listen to our drums by themselves. And that's with a vocal compressor. So let's turn off the compressor so that we can just, the vocal compressor that they have as a preset for this is very, very, very strong compressor. So let's listen to, it without and with compressor. Sounding a lot punchier, right? All right, so, So let's start messing with some of this stuff. So what I do first is I set the threshold at 0, okay? Now what the threshold is, we talked about threshold with noise gate, and all a threshold is pretty much at what decibel does the compressor actually start working. Actually, I'm gonna start by telling you what exactly compressor does. Now, what does compression do? Have you ever used like a zip file? You're compressing all these files. You're kind of scrunching it down to a good size, right? And in a way, that's kind of how audio compression works. It's more like, all right, so let's turn this off. See how all of this treble stuff gets pretty high over here? Let's say I don't want it to go above like 36. You know what I mean? Or I do, but I don't want to actually just fucking cut the thing off there. Because what that does is it starts, the volume starts dropping and it sounds really weird. We're going to do something similar to that later when we start mastering. It's called, in the program I use, a loudness maximizer. It's pretty much, like a limiter. So what a compressor is doing is it's taking all of this, wave, all of these sound waves going, and at a certain point, we're telling the sound to, don't go so high, you know what I mean? So once the threshold is reached, we're telling the sound to turn down like a certain amount, and that's what the ratio is. Now, it's not... When we talk about how much sound is going to be turned down, we're not talking about it in terms of decibels. We're talking about it in terms of ratio. So how much of the sound that is above the threshold are we not going to want, right? So let's see how it works in this. We're going to turn the attack and release down. Actually, yeah, turn it down. We'll talk about that later. Level, we'll set it at about 8 for the drums. It's usually what works for me. See what works for you. So right now, since we have a threshold of 0, all it's really doing is turning up the level, because that's the only thing we have turned up right now. Now, as we start turning up the threshold, we're going to see this red light start turning on. And what that means is that the compressor is actually working. So that's what gain reduction. This isn't this knob. Gain reduction is this red dot right here, and that's going to light up when the compressor is in effect. So right now we have it set at whenever the sound reaches negative 14 decibels, which is really like all the way up here. What we're doing right here is this is all average kind of, frequencies that are going up. If we were to actually increase the speed, watch what happens. That's actually really getting up there, right? So we're turn it down to 8 to simplify things for us, for our eyes. So let's all right, so let's play it again and get a good threshold. Actually, maybe a little bit more than 14. Let's try 16. And that's sounding okay, right? All right, so now let's talk about the ratio. So now what I said before was that the ratio is going to actually, turn down. Once it reaches that point, it's going to turn down the volume at a certain amount of volume. So let's say that after it reaches the threshold, the amount of volume that's after that, how much of that do we not want? And you'd be surprised, we do want some of that. Otherwise, it's going to start sounding really, really fake. So let's start turning up the ratio so you can see what I mean. And that's just fucking weird. So I do turn up the 4.1 is where I set the drums for my songs at, and that's a lot of fucking compression. But drums really need to be compressed a lot as opposed to like distorted guitars. So now that we have the ratio, I've never seen this thing. This is the knee. I think the knee is more of like how aggressive the slope of the compressor is. If you YouTube some other kinds of compressor, or see the one in GarageBand, it's actually a visual thing instead of just a bunch of knobs that you can turn. You actually see how much of the sound you're actually turning down at a certain point. So for the drums, I actually like to turn this down at about 50. And that's sounding okay. So now let's talk about attack and release. Now, what does attack and release mean? This took me fucking forever to realize because all the YouTube videos took forever to just say like, okay, this is what this does and this is what the other one does, you know? I'm some big time fucking recording artist and I know everything and you should know nothing. What the attack does is this is how long it takes for the effect of the compressor to kick in. So, what I actually like to do for heavy compressed, instruments that are clean, I actually like to set the attack at something closer to the tempo. Now at a BPM of about 150, we're actually going to be working with around 400 milliseconds. A good way to figure that out is if you look at the delay on your Gearbox or Pod Farm or whatever. You'll see that there's a little bit of, you set your BPM and you set, a quarter note, you can see how many milliseconds of delay is going on. For 150 beats per minute, it's actually like 400 milliseconds exactly. So we're going to set this at like 3.97, which is pretty much the closest to there. And we're going to set that at the attack. So at 3.97 milliseconds, the compressor is going to kick in when the volume has jumped. So what that means is that for like a brief second, we're going to get the full volume of the sound of like say a bass drum and a cymbal, but then it's going to turn down. And what that's going to make it sound is very punchy. It's just going to be like bam, da, 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 bam, whenever the volume is going to, go above the threshold. And I'll show you how that sounds. Actually, let's turn up the release too. Now the release is when the compressor is actually, it's going to stop working. So we're going to actually match that, 3.97. Let's turn it up to 0.0, as close to 0.04 as we can get. So right about there. So after 0.04 seconds of the compressor, after the sound is off of the threshold, that's when the compressor is going to stop. Am I making sense? I hope so. It's very quick that these attack and releases are working. Remember, we're dealing with milliseconds, like 4 milliseconds of, non-compressed sound. And that's pretty much how I go about doing, my drum compressor. Now, in retrospect, you'll notice that over on our Spectrum, the treble is getting pretty crazy. Now I'll show you a trick to deal with that. We're actually going to go into the EZ Drummer you know, thingy. Let's open up the mixer. That's by clicking this. And we can see the mixing of each instrument. Now, there is a way to actually export each of these instruments by themselves into one track at a time. And if you want to get really crazy and really perfect with this stuff, then go for it, man. But I usually just deal with it like this. And you do that with output, and you do that with, you know, whatever instrument tracks. So you'll notice that we have a bunch of shit here. We've got kick drums, snare, snare B, hi-hat, tom, overhead, and room. So a lot of the treble is coming from your hi-hats. That's the most like trebliest instrument that you're usually going to be working with when doing these covers, unless you're doing some really high fucking synthesizer shit. So that's all hi-hat and overhead. I know a lot of people are like, what the fuck? I'm turning down the hi-hat and nothing's happening. So let's find a hi-hat part. Yeah, right there. See how the hi-hat is getting really over here? So if I were to turn the hi-hat all the way down, the fuck did that do, right? That's because the hi-hat is actually also over here. So if we solo the overhead mics, sorry, I meant the room. That's actually where most of that treble sound is coming from. So what we can do is we can actually lower the room mic. Let's lower the overhead a little bit. And then we'll get this sound. It's a little less reverby, but we can fix that by adding more reverb. Yay! So let's turn the wet mix up to about 9. Or 9. There we go. Now that's like super punchy, and the reason it's super punchy is because all of our low frequencies are being like really compressed, and it's sounding like bam, 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 bam. As you can see, I'm really tired. All right, so let's. So okay, maybe I turned it down a little too much. So let's turn up the hi-hat a little bit more, and then turn the room mic up a little bit more. Now, each of these instruments dealing with a compressor and dealing with all these levels, it's all about balance, man. Like you fucking, you're doing one thing, you're altering another thing. And it's about finding the best balance you can find with each instrument by themselves and then with each instrument all together. So, this is good. This is a good drum sound. And you notice even in this heavy hi-hat part, everything's pretty flat. And that's what we want. All right, so now let's talk about compressing our bass guitar. And that's going to be it for this video. We're not going to compress our lead guitars or our rhythm guitars because, they're already pretty much compressed already. Like, I said that earlier in the tones video. All right, so now let's look at our bass guitar. All right, so I did the same thing as I did last time. Now let's set a good threshold to see, when, a good, it's not, the compressor's not working completely the entire time, but it's still working. So let's find that decibel. About perfect. All right, so now let's hit the ratio at about, I actually like 371. Now we're talking about in terms of like fractions. So if I were to set it at like 2:1, what's going to happen is after it reaches the threshold, all of the sound afterwards is going to be cut in half, 2:1. We're actually going to go 3 to 701. 3 to 7. There we go. It's making it a lot punchier, which is, you know, what you want, especially for this song. All right, so we're going to do the same thing as we did for the drums. We're going to set the attack to about 3, as close to 4 as we can. Same thing with the release. And then we get this sound. Now remember how we EQ'd all this stuff? Like, it's really hard to get that stuff out, but it's good to get out what you can, because that stuff, all of this area gets really, really flooded with shit. So let's listen to this. This is actually also the part with the smack. That could actually get really loud with the compressor. Let's hear it. Actually, not too bad. All right. So, I mean, that's all I do, you know? Maybe we'll set this at 50. I don't really do too crazy of a knee thing. Maybe, you know, maybe it's just that I don't understand it a hell of a lot yet. But, you know, not too crazy. All right, so now let's copy this and put it on the distorted bass. Now for the distorted bass, I actually remember in the last EQ video, I did the distortion first. You want to put your compressor before the distortion, otherwise it's going to cause some problems. The other thing you want to do is turn your output all the way down so that you can alter these levels a bit better. So now that you've got your compressor set for your bass guitar and for your distorted bass, hear how they sound together. It sounded okay. You know, you can just barely hear the distortion as opposed to the clean sound. So now with the drums. I mean, how's that sound to you guys? I think it sounds all right. So now let's listen to it with the distortion guitars. We're going to do the same thing we did with the levels for before, because now that we've compressed these instruments, shit can start getting fucked up. So our bass is getting kind of loud, so let's turn those down. And see how, you know, I didn't even have to really listen to know that. I know because I looked at this thing. You know, you don't have to have golden ears to be a good mixer. I mean, you do need good ears, but, you know, whatever. All right. And that sounds good. We can hear the bass pretty well. Maybe a little bit more because the leads are going to also be in the mix and start fucking with shit. Say that a lot. Fucking with shit. Shitting with fuck. All right, now let's throw in our leads. All right, so now that I'm listening to it all with all of our effects and it's sounding pretty nice, I am noticing a few things that I want to change. Like, for instance, the lead guitars sound really nasally. We're going to fix that in here. So what are we going to do? We're going to also do the telescoping that we did in the last video. So we're going to go blah, blah, and try to find where all those nasally frequencies are. We did kind of just go like, ah, God, that hurts my ears. Let's turn that down really quickly. So we didn't really get too detailed into that. It seems like the nasal frequencies are right there. So let's turn that down. Right about there. Oh yeah, don't ask about the preset. I just kind of like punched the keyboard. All right, so now I'm gonna add that to the other tracks and hear how it sounds with the full mix in a second. All right, so now the new EQ is set on the new lead track, so let's hear how that sounds. You know, in retrospect, now, the rhythm guitars aren't loud enough. See, this is going to take a while. You're going to start being like, shit, now that I did that, now this isn't working out. So let's turn those up. 27. A little bit more. Let's hear how that sounds. Oh, now that I notice, look over here. Our drums are fucking topping out and shit. Let's look at that a little bit more. Let's examine that. And that's because of our compressor. So let's delve into here a little bit more. So we got to figure out why this is happening. It's all about problem solving. So this could be because our levels are too high. I mean, it could just be as simple as that. Or our attack is too high. Or our ratio is too high. So this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to play with these and try to figure out, what's wrong with it. Let's try turning down the levels, see what that does. We're actually not topping out at all. Cool. It was the level. Whatever. All right, and that's pretty much, these past 3 videos have been about mixing. Our thing is pretty much mixed at this point. I mean, sounds pretty good to me. Obviously it doesn't sound quite like how my videos sound yet, but that's because we haven't mastered it yet. This could be, where you're done. Don't feel like you have to master just because it's available. Some songs sound absolutely fine after you're done mixing. Just leave it alone. If something doesn't need anything, don't add it just because you feel like you have to. I mean, one of the best things that I've ever read about mixing is to really, really trust your ears. Don't trust anybody else. Don't trust me, because I'm full of shit. Trust yourself. Use these techniques to help you get the best mix that you possibly can. Now, there are tons of resources on the internet. There's even like a subreddit called We Are the Music Makers that I check out a lot, and they've got amazing stuff. And those guys are fucking hardcore. They know their shit, as opposed to me. But there's tons of resources out there to learn how to do this stuff. Better than me. So use them and get the best mix you can possible. Now, I'm not satisfied with this yet, but I think I've mixed it to the best of my ability. So the next thing we're going to do is master. Now, what you want to get before the next video is a little program called iZotope Ozone. If you have the money for it. It's quite expensive. I think I spent a good amount of money for it, but I got a lower end version. I got 3. I think 4 is out now. But just for, price reasons. But even if you don't have the money for that, you can actually do everything that you do mastering with the effects by using global effects. So if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. I mean, we'll work around it, but it will be nice to have because the video is going to be all about it next week. So be sure to give yourself enough breaks in between, mixing so that your ears don't get tired. Another good resource to use is to reference. So listen to a song that you know really well. So stop mixing completely. Then go and listen to something, that you like a lot and that you like the sound of it. Listen to it for a little while, take a break, eat some cereal, and fucking, come back to it and, you might have a much more open mind about what you're doing. So I think, we talked about everything that needs to be discussed. Next week, we're going to talk about mastering, and we're going to finish this fucker up.